Namaste and good morning. Let's start our class with some prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhava Swaha, Tat Savitra Varenyam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, Asto Ma Satgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamya. Om Sahna Vavatu Sahna Bhunaktu Saviryam Karvavagi Tejasvinav Dhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And that book which you all have, this Upanishad is in there. So you don't have to have another book. It is there, Kenopanishad. So where are the Upanishads? Where do they come from? They are part of the Vedas. Sometimes we call Veda. So the word Ved comes from the root Vid. See, in Sanskrit, every word has a root to it. So Vid means to know. So that means Ved means the knowledge. And we often hear that Veda is eternal. So that doesn't mean that the books where all these mantras are written, they are indestructible, like a textbooks. No, it really means the knowledge of the self is indestructible, because that's what the knowledge is in the Vedas. Knowledge of the self, knowledge of God. And there can never be any harm to this truth, the self, the soul. And that is the theme of all these Upanishads, the soul, the self. The authors or the seers of the Upanishadic mantras, because all these Vedas and the Upanishads, they are written in the mantra form. So the authors, they were rishis. They lived in the forests, in seclusion for years and years. They did that very intense practice. Because first they lived in the world, they felt the hollowness of the worldly life, the material life, and they shifted from the material life to the spiritual life. They wanted to know the means to attain that highest goal. Because they knew that in this worldly life, sure, there's a joy, but then there are sorrows also. There are laughters and smiles, but there are tears also. So there was a call within them. And that's why they listened to the call and they moved away from the cities. They had a deep dispassion. And they retired into the thick forests of the Ganges Valley. And with a highly developed mind and intellect, what did they do? They observed. They observed the nature also. They analyzed that what is everything grow. So they observed, they analyzed, they classified, then they concluded how and why of the deep workings of the psychological and the spiritual person in them. So that's why these rishis and these yogis, they are called the scientists also. They learned this body, they learned the outside body, they learned that life force which is keeping all of this together. So they were the real scientists. And when we study the Upanishads, some coming from the minds of these great rishis. And we also see that these disciples, all them some disciples, they had the gurus. And they carried the torch of the knowledge, which they learned from their guru. They maintained that knowledge, they nursed that knowledge, they nourished that knowledge through their own experiences. Because every guru encourages that you have to experience this. Sure, what I'm telling you, this is my experience, but you have to experience it too. So, but they handed it over with that blazing fire of knowledge to the next generation. So from the teacher to the taught, the knowledge, succeeding master of self-science. So this is a science of the self. But these minds of these masters, they were so selflessly true to their pursuit of the truth. So they were so thrilled in the thrill of their pursuit or their experience, they even ignored themselves. We rarely have the identification of a person who has written those mantras or these Upanishads. Almost all the Upanishads, the authors are unknown. It's almost like they forgot to add their signature on their beautiful works. Later on, from here and there, people found out who wrote it. That's where the names come from. But they themselves never wrote their names. They never copyrighted those rights. They said freely use them and distribute this knowledge. Because to them, the discovery itself was more important. Because they recognized the hollowness of personal fame and name. Because they were looking at that immortality in them. They wanted to experience that. They didn't want to lose any time or any energy going into the name and the fames of this life. So such a brilliant line of seekers, each and every one crying out the same truth. It cannot be false. In any sense of the term, their statement. Sometimes we don't understand it because we have not experienced it. But they are speaking the same truth. These rishis, they were so much detached from this worldly life, worldly name and fame. Even the kings had no hold on them. Because the seers lived in absolute freedom. See, we are looking for the ultimate freedom, the mukti. So they lived with that kind of a freedom too. They were totally detached from the court life because they were looking at their inner perfection. So the Upanishads are revelations, not the products of the individual mind. So discipline of the mind and soared into that higher realm of greater subtlety. And they remain in that poise for a long time. Because we see that in that writing, in the Upanishadic writings, that how these gurus, they are teaching, and after teaching, they just become silent, totally silent. They are absorbed in themselves, these seers. And this is the fulfillment of life. When this kind of a mind, the lower mind is sublimated, the kind of a mind we normally have, what happens? Sublimation of this lower mind takes us towards that faculty which is called intuition. Intuition. It's awakened in a person. But as long as this low experience this intuition, to sublimate this mind. And that's how through intuition we can realize the truth. And that's how the seers and the sages, they realize the truth. So just always remember that absolute truth is not imagined or rationally determined. It is intuitively experienced. Remember that when we study these Upanishads. So these sacred Upanishads are the cream of those our yogis' achievements in life. See, there are 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajurveda. Each Veda has 3 parts to it. So third part is the Upanishad. The first part is what? Mantras. Second part is Brahmans. Third part is Upanishads, which are also called Aranyaks. Aranya means forest. So Aranyaks. Very term Aranyak itself that is needed. It means field of peace, the mind, intellect, to speed out and take off from the gross material earthly thoughts or even earthly considerations, but to move away from there and move towards the higher. I mean, we all know that from our experience, if we have some kind of a personal problem, what do? Some people will just go for a walk. Don't you do that? Go for a walk, go to a quiet place, mentally review the pros and cons, and come to a final decision. That quietness is needed. So, when just an ordinary material problem needs solitude, needs space. I mean, these days children say, I have some space. Then we can see that how much more should we need the right atmosphere to delve within and seek the eternal well of life. So that's why it's very important. We don't have to just move into the forest, but these days we can have our own little seclusion, a meditation area, a prayer areas, no matter where we live. That's our own forest. A perfectly peaceful place. So Upanishads disclose to us the road to the within. So with that kind of a thought in your mind, we need to study this Upanishad. Okay, so it's a road, it's like a journey within. Outer journeys we do, but this is a journey within. We got to see that those ideals which these rishis are talking about, can we really experience those ideals or not? These rishis, they had to prepare a specialized, cultured language. That's why this language is called as Sanskrit. We are all familiar with the Sanskar. We are familiar with Sanskriti. Sanskrit is a language which is highly evolved and cultured. So all these Upanishads are written in this language, Sanskrit cultured language. Because Upanishadic mantras, they fulfill their functions only through these pregnant suggestiveness. So that means each word itself is full of meanings. These Upanishads, they do not directly and openly express or explain. So that's why we are not supposed to just read these Upanishads like a novel or a newspaper. There is an indicative meaning behind each word. There is a very secret import in their meaningful suggestiveness. They simply guide us to their very presence of truth. So these are like a guidelines. With the help of the guidelines, we start our journey within. So we always need the interpretation from a guru to understand fully the meaning of the Upanishads. At least one or two Upanishads should be studied at the feet of the guru. Then you understand, you start understanding, then rest sure you can study by yourself also, but you have to prepare your mind and intellect so that you can understand the deep implication of these Upanishads. Because any amount of mere reading would not reveal to us their fuller wealth of meaning. So in other words, I can say that these mantras are secretive by their very nature. It's not that they want to keep it secret, but they are so deep that for an ordinary mind, it seems like, hey, I am not getting anything out of it. There's a secret message embedded in there. So not only we need a teacher, but we also must have a certain special energy, inner energy to concentrate and contemplate. Teacher could be a Brahma himself, but if a student is not ready, student has not done the preparation, it will not, the knowledge will not seep in. And this energy is gained only when we live a noble life. Noble life means with the ethical and moral values. So we got to watch ourselves. Are we living a life keeping the yam and the niyams in our mind or not? Do we have a harmony between our mind, body, and the speech or not? That is very important to understand these deep Upanishads. That's why ever since we were little, we were told, be good, do good, be regular in your daily prayers, meditations. Maintain self-control. These senses should be in our control. Only then we can even expect our mind to be in our control, which is called brahmacharya. Try to get into the spirit of Upanishadic mantras as we explore their inner meanings and implications. So this particular Upanishad, the Kena Upanishad, has 4 chapters. So that was just a background on all the Upanishads which I just talked about. So this Kena Upanishad, this is from Samved. As I told you, each Ved has the Upanishads as a last part of it. So Samved. 4 chapters. So first chapter has 8 verses. Second chapter, 5 verses. Third chapter, 12 verses. Fourth chapter, 9 verses. Not very big Upanishad. In fact, in the Kena Upanishad, there is a Talvakra branch. In that Talvakra branch, this is just one of the chapter in that branch, which is called a Kena Upanishad. It's the 9th chapter on that. The 8 preceding chapters of that treaty deal with the Karam and Upasana. Karam and Upasana. because karam and upasana is very important. What is a karam? According to the Vedic terminology, karam means yajnas, karam kand. Karam kand prepares us. Karam kand is not useless. So yajna to be performed, karam kand. That's why every householder is supposed to do Panch Mahayajna. With those Panch Mahayajna, we prepare ourselves. And then the second part I told you, Upasana, which roughly means the early exercises for the higher meditations to be practiced, Upasana. Upasana, sitting near your altar, and your altar should be higher than you, not even at the same level, higher than you. That's why there's a tradition. If your guru is sitting on the chair, you sit down. If your guru is sitting on the floor, offer a cushion to the guru, you sit without a cushion. If guru doesn't have a cushion, he is sitting without the cushion, give a little sheet to the guru and you sit without the sheet. So this is like a symbol of respect. That's how we do the upasana. So in your own mandirs, in your own altar, make sure it is at a higher level. Make sure your altar is higher. That's how we do the upasana. Imagining that God is sitting in front of me, create a little humility inside you. We are smaller. Unless we become one with God, then there's no me and him. There's only one, only he. So rituals and formalities are also a great help for this self-discipline. Because what happens, we human beings are essentially the creatures of desires. If we did not have any desire, we won't be here. But with this delusion, we have only worldly desires. And slowly we just keep on cleaning this delusion. So that's why the Vedic rishis, they say that understand your desires through the prescribed yajnas. Because in the yajna, what do? We say, fulfill my desires. Then we do little meditations. We rise above the worldly desires. So that's why yajna, which is called a karma, and then upasana. You just keep on shunting down your worldly desires. Some by fulfilling them, and some by just understanding that this is just a delusion. And after the endless tossings between the world above and the earth, because what happens in the yajnas, we are saying that God, help me for my future life. I want to go to a place where there is a lot of opulence. Then after that, you say, no, send me to heaven. Then after that, coming back and forth, this is the tossing. After so many lifetimes, certain amount of dispassion. This passion for the worldly pleasure and the heavenly pleasure is called the growth. That is the growing we need to do. But rituals help us to grow. When we do the rituals with the right kind of a frame of mind. So pure, selfless spirit of God dedication comes. We say everything I'm going to do it just for God, not for me anymore. Desire to serve God and only God. That is should come with the help of this Karamkand and Upasana. And as the person keeps on gaining greater and greater understanding of the hollowness of the outer world of some pursuits. hollowness. No matter how important it looks, the worldly pursuits, they are hollow. They are impermanent. So this kind of a disciple understands the very best which even the heavens could give is just ultimately sorrow. Sorrow ridden, as they say. Because either you will get bored with it or it will be snatched from you. Life in the heaven is also not eternal. There is a time frame. So imperfection is the very stuff of the finite. Limitation is the almost like a canker. And that is the root of all. So we got to understand that. So this realization when comes, this kind of understanding, if you have, even if a little bit, you can understand these Upanishads, the real meaning of the Upanishads. So keep on doing the karam kand, the yajnas, keep on doing the upasana also. That is like a preliminary meditation, which is called a concentration actually, the dharana. You will discover that your inclination is more and more towards this infinite, this truth. So dispassion, discrimination, and reduction of the worldly desires, we got to keep. This is part of our sadhana. So I told you last time that every Upanishad starts with an invocation. This particular Upanishad has two mantras for the invocation. One we are all familiar with, which we recite every day before our class. Om Sahanavavatu, Sahanobhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavagi, Tejasvi Navadgitamastu, Ma Vidveshavagi. So we all recite that every day, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the meaning of that. Because teacher and the student or students, they are praying to God. They're saying, God, please protect us. We understand that we say, God, you are the cause for the joy. For both of us. May we both exert together to discover the true inner meaning of the scriptures. So that exertion is needed. A little effort is needed. May our studies be thorough and faithful. That means we just study it deeply and faithfully. May we never misunderstand each other. It's like no argument. Sure, questions are important, but no arguments. Okay, have a discussion to just to bring out the truth, not just to put each other down. And then at the end we say Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So you are all familiar with this verse. Now let's look at the second invocation. Om Apyah Anturumam Angani Vak Prana Chakshu Shrotram Atho Balam Indriyani Cha Sarvani Sarvam Brahm Upanishadam Ma Aham Brahm Nirakarot Astuhu Nirakarnam Astu Nirakarnam Me Astu Tat Atmani Nirdehe Upanishadastu Dharma Te Santihi Mai Santuhu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Again, all the mantras they start with Om. We are familiar with that. Apya Ayantuhu may grow vigorous. Mam means my, Angani limbs. Vak means speech. Pran means the vital air, the pran. Chakshu, eyes. Shrotram, ear. Atha, Ath means then or now. Balam, strength. Indriyani, senses. Cha means and. Sarvani, all. Sarvani means all. Sarvam means all. So this Sarvam really means like a of the Brahma Sarvam. Upanishadam of the Upanishad. Ma, never. Aham, I. Brahma. Nirakaro, may reject, like a may spurn. Astuhu, may there be. Nirakarnam, non-denial of the Brahma. Astu, may there be. Nirakarnam, non-denial. May means may. Astu, let there be. Tat Atmanihi, in the Atma. Nirtehe, enlightening. Upanishadasu, in the Upanishad. Dharmaha, virtues. Te means they. Santihi, are present. May in me. Santu, may. And then Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. So in the invocation, there's always this Shantihi word 3 times at the end. May my limbs, speech, Prana, eyes, ears, strength of all my senses grow vigorous. So it's like a praying to God. We need to take care of it. So over here we are praying, but then at the same time we got to do our part also. That's why a yogi guru always says that do yoga every day. Cleansings, pranayama, all that is needed. So it's not just only being worshipful, it's also being careful of our duties. So may my limbs, speech, prana, eye, ear, strength of all my senses grow vigorous. All means like everything is the Brahman of the Upanishads. This is all Brahman. May I never deny the Brahman. May the Brahman never spurn me, reject me. May there be no denial of the Brahman. May there be no spurning by the Brahman. Let all the repose in me. Delighting in the Atma, may they in me repose. So in the previous verse, Om Sahana Bhavatu, the idea was almost like a team spirit. The teacher and the student approaching towards that higher power and saying that, please give us help so that we can progress. We have a mutual cooperation with each other. So that's why it's almost like a part of that prayer is, may we never quarrel with each other. Almost like a quarrel, because sometimes you see that this ego of ours start to impose on the other person, and then there's a discussion which takes us towards a really bad taste in our mouth. So we are saying, may we never do that. So that kind of a prayer is especially imperative in the study of the scriptures, where it's not very clear the deep message. We got to just only have a faith, and with our own experience later on, we experience the truth. So that's where the surrender is needed. Otherwise, we just end up wasting our time in the useless arguments, misunderstandings, wrong understandings of even the Shrutis also sometimes. So that's where the little surrender is needed. But in this second verse, we find how essential it is for a sadhak to build up a very harmonious personality. So it's not just between two, that one was between two, this is between ourselves. Physical, psychological, and spiritual entities in us. Harmony there. Because a spiritual path is not for a sick person at the body level. They almost say the broken bodies, especially if you have not worked on your mind yet, and your body breaks, your mind breaks with it. So spiritual path is not for the broken bodies or even for the constricted hearts. If you do not have not opened up your heart yet, how does the heart opens? Through the upasanas. Heart has to be open. And for the if the head is crumbled, you cannot study it. So physical strength we need, physical health we need, openness in the heart we need, and peaceful of the mind we need. If we just get shaken up by every little thing, we cannot study this. Sometimes it could be at the worldly level, global level, like this COVID happened. If you just get disturbed by it, forget about the studies. Or sometimes it could be at the national level. Sometimes it could be at the family level. All of that we got to show, do our duty, take care of it. But our main duty is to know ourselves, to spend some time. So that's why in this particular invocation mantra, this is what I say. That these rishis are telling us to have a healthy body, open heart, peaceful mind. And again, it is not sufficient if we pursue only the path, we must also invoke the constant grace of the Supreme. That is also mentioned in this verse. And he used the word Brahm. Constant connection with that God, whether it's a formless or form, this form or that form, does not matter. Constant connection is needed. May the Brahm never spurn me. See, Brahm doesn't spurn us, we spurn ourselves. We move away from it. Brahm is always there, but we have to make sure that our connection, mental connection, is there. So each day, the teacher and the student, they start their lessons chanting these two mantras. And what we're going to do, we already do the other one, but we're going to add this one also in our first day's classes until we finish this Kenopanishad. So let me read this meaning again. May my limbs, speech, Prana, eye, ear, strength of all my senses grow vigorous. And why do we want all this? These students and the guru, they're already detached. They have a dispassion. They want this body to be healthy so that they can just forget about this body. Because if this body is sick, our attention is always towards the body. We want to do our duties, that body is healthy, and I don't have to worry about it. I can go do something which I came here for. So may my limbs, speech, prana, eye, ear, strength of all my senses grow vigorous. Everything is the Brahma of the Upanishads. Upanishads talk about Brahma. I should understand that everything is just Brahma. May I never deny the Brahma. When we make the worldly things more important, we are denying Brahma automatically. Worldly things are there, let them be, but never forget God. May the Brahm never spurn me. May there be no denial of the Brahm. May there be no spurning by the Brahm. Let all the virtues recited by the Upanishads repose in me. So that means I keep on walking on the path of the morality and ethics. I don't want to lie. I don't want to steal. I don't want to become greedy. I don't want to go towards the materialism. This is what it means, that let all the virtues recited by the Upanishads, because Upanishads talk like this. All the Upanishads, the last Upanishad we studied, Prashna Upanishad, again and again. In fact, that Rishi Piplad, he made those students go through the tapasya for 1 year. Those are the virtues. So let all the virtues recited by the Upanishads repose in me. I become the embodiment of those virtues. No matter what happens, I will never tell a lie. No matter what happens, I'll never be greedy. So that kind of a commitment we got to make if we want to understand the deeper implications of these Upanishads and ultimately experience that Brahman is everywhere. Let all the virtues recited by the Upanishads repose in me, delighting in the Atma. This is exactly what Lord Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, rejoicing in the Atma. Because the senses want to rejoice in the outer world. They are deluded. Ultimate joy, delightfulness is inside, right here. So that's why we are saying over here, Tat Atmani nirtehe upanishu dharmate santi me santu. May they in me repose. And again, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So next week we'll start with chapter 1 and verse 1. But let me tell you the meaning of this Cain. Cain. Cain means by whom. Okay, so Cain Upanishad, by whom. So we will understand more as we go along. Why this Upanishad is called the Cain Upanishad. But in case you are wondering, Cain means by whom. Om Purnamada. Purnamadaaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you very much.